like
Okay.
to introduce everyone?
Yeah, my name is Jeremy Crow. I've been an occultist for over 30 years now, and I've considered myself a Luciferian for almost that entire time. I consider myself specifically a Gnostic Luciferian because, as you know, there are different currents or branches within all of these things. I've been pretty involved in the esoteric order scene, been a member of a bunch of different ones. I was also involved in a Gnostic church and was ordained a priest, a Gnostic priest in that. I was involved with an esoteric Freemasonry order, a couple of them actually. And, OTO, I was a part of briefly, Golden Dawn. And I ended up getting involved in some Luciferian group. Ended up becoming the head of the Ordo Luciferi, which later ended up becoming public domain sort of thing, or open source, I should say. And it kind of went inactive, but I've revived it in a sense, or resurrected it in a new form. I took the material that I had written for that and brought it forward into a new group called the Novus Ordo Luciferi. I've produced several international left-hand path conferences. I founded the Luciferian Research Society. I was also co-president of the Greater Church of Lucifer alongside Michael W. Ford and Hope Marie Ford. Yeah, I've been pretty heavily involved in the Luciferian and left-hand path communities for a very long time.
While we're on the topic of the Order of Light Bearers and LRS, would you mind explaining what you do for both of those organizations?
Yeah, so the Luciferian Research Society, I'll start with that. It is an open community which does not have any titles or hierarchy behind it. It's completely free to participate in, and the intention for that was to create a place or a type of community center for Luciferians in particular, but also adjacent paths, Satanism, Setian, Sinistrous, any left-hand path occultists, or just even occultism in general, to get together across sectarian lines and to share knowledge with one another, to share fellowship, and to strengthen the bonds between the different traditions and enable a greater level of cooperation and mutual support. Because there's a lot of you find a lot of isolation on the left-hand path. I find a lot of different groups will just kind of stick to themselves, and I wanted to create a place for those different groups to meet together on the level without kind of hierarchy or titles, where people could share freely and build bridges in the different branches and traditions and perspectives in the left-hand path. We've actually been expanding that mission. One expansion of that is the left-hand path conferences. That's expanding that into the real world in like individual, like a weekend, like a long weekend where people can get together in person and share, listen to lectures and presentations, rituals, group rituals, and things like that. But also we've been started an initiative where we're doing these public meetings online, and we are also doing local branches. So we haven't gotten the local branches established yet, but there is one in Ontario, Canada, Toronto and surrounding areas in particular, that is just about to start doing local meetings. A lot of work has been done, and that's my area that I'm in. And there are several other places around the world that have been working on getting a local branch established of the Luciferian Research Society. And it's the same ethos, the same mission, just expanded into the real world, into in-person meeting places. And in the meantime, we are having open meetings quite often, probably about 3 times a week, and people can participate in that. They can listen to lectures, engage in open group discussion and that sort of thing. And a lot of them are recorded, and I've put them up, those recordings up on my YouTube channel, as well as on the Luciferian Research Society Facebook page. Those are the 2 places that those recordings have been put up. For the Novus Ordo Luciferi, that is, as you called it, the New Order of Light Bearers. That's the English version of that. That is a specific esoteric order. So the Luciferian Research Society is not an esoteric order. It doesn't have grades, it doesn't have titles, it doesn't have its own teachings. It's a meeting place for people of all different perspectives to share their various different diverse perspectives and knowledge and that sort of thing. Whereas the Novus Ordo Luciferi is an esoteric order. And it is the vehicle for me to share the system of occultism that I've developed over my 30 plus years of practicing and developing a unique system of occultism that I refer to as Gnostic Luciferian alchemy. Sometimes I just call it Luciferian alchemy to make it easy. And that involves lucid dreaming, astral projection, various different forms of divination, ritual magic, energy work that includes internal alchemy, shadow work, that sort of thing. So that does have grades, degrees, although that system is optional. I find that most people do want structured way of navigating through the material that is available to members. And there's quite a bit of inner order material already available, including a whole bunch of video courses. So I think right now we have like 15 or 16 different video courses, which is somewhere around 50 hours of recorded video. We also have quite a few internal documents that include teachings as well as specific practices. And it can be a little overwhelming for people when they first come into the order and become a member. So it does help to have that graded system. So it is optional, as I said, but a lot of people, I think most people want that third path through so they know, well, which one should I start with? Which practices and which teaching should I work with first and then move forward and that sort of thing. And it's the grade system, the degree system isn't fully activated yet, but it's something that I've been working heavily on in the last few months in particular. First few steps on that should be available shortly. But the entire system has been plotted out, and it's quite elaborate.
How long have you been practicing Luciferianism, and what would you say drew you to it?
I would say that I've been a Luciferian for almost 30 years now. I got involved heavily into occultism when I was 17. And I initially found myself interested in that because I was raised Catholic initially, and I was, well, here's the thing. I wasn't baptized as a baby. My parents wanted to put me into Catholic school, which has better funding here in Canada, and you tend to get a little bit better of an education. And also my father went through Catholic school. So when they went to enroll me, they said, well, what parish or what church do you attend? Like, we don't. And they said, oh, okay, well, you should probably be attending church. Well, which church was your son baptized in? And they said, well, he wasn't. They said, okay, well, why don't you come to a few masses at the church that's associated with this elementary school and get him baptized, and then we can register him. And that's what they did. And I was around 5 years old at the time. And so I remember my baptism, and I remember going to mass. And it was such a new experience for me when I went in there, and you see them like with all these candles, robes, incense, and they've got the censer and they're swinging it around, and the altar at the front. And I was like, what is going on here? And it had a big impact on me, that ritual, and I wanted to learn more about it. And as I learned more about it, as I got older, I started realizing that there was a lot that I disagreed with the Catholic system, that there was quite a few things about the history of the church, about the belief system. At some point around when I was a teenager, I was like, okay, I can't be part of this anymore. But I did still feel that drive, that spiritual drive to explore and to understand and to practice. And so when I discovered through my explorations ritual magic, particular Golden Dawn inspired ritual magic, clicked with me. It was a step that I was willing to take forward in that, where it still felt somewhat familiar to what I had experienced growing up with the ritual of the church, but it didn't have all that baggage of the Catholic beliefs associated with it. And it allowed me to explore further and take matters into my own hands rather than having some external person like a priest doing it as an intercessor for me. I got to be the one doing the ritual for myself, exploring my spirituality for myself without having to ask permission from authority figure. And that was when I was 17. And then when I was old enough, when I turned 21, I joined an esoteric branch of Freemasonry that, regular Freemasons or mainstream Masons would refer to it as clandestine or irregular Freemasonry, because we had some additional esoteric elements added to it from the influence of Theosophy, the Theosophical Society, and we also allowed men and women equally to that. And I went through and I was heavily involved in that. I got introduced to Gnosticism, and through that, that kind of combination of Masonry and Gnosticism made me realize that I was a Luciferian. It kind of triggered, as I was contemplating the symbols and the stories and that sort of thing, it just clicked all of a sudden, and I realized, oh, I'm a Luciferian. So I guess I was probably about 22, I guess, at the time. And I am now 48. So I guess that's closer to around what? 14, 20, not 30 years. What's that?
17.
17 years? What?
Yeah,
27
17.
years?
Yeah. Oh wait, how old did you say he was again?
I'm 48. So
Oh,
I
it's a
guess that
way
would
too
be
late
like
on that to age on
20,
that.
27 years or something like that.
Yeah, something like
I,
that.
but when I did realize that I was a Luciferian, I realized that I had been a Luciferian for at least a few years before that. I just didn't have a word for it, or I just didn't allow myself to accept that word until that point. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people who come to this path or to the left-hand path, once they realize that label, I think a lot of people realize, well, I've actually been, this matches what I've believed for a while now, and I just didn't have the proper terminology to describe it. So that's kind of how
While we're
I
on the
came to
topic of, oh, sorry, continue.
Oh no, I was just wrapping that wrapping that story up with a statement.
Yeah. Well, while we're on the topic of Luciferianism, would you want to give a brief breakdown of your beliefs in it, your personal beliefs?
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. So I do feel that I need to give a disclaimer because Luciferianism is not a dogmatic or system or religion or philosophy or whatever you want to term it. It is non-dogmatic, which means that I can only speak for myself. I don't speak on behalf of anyone else. So my understanding of Luciferianism stems back to the meaning of the word Lucifer. It's a Latin word that literally means light bearer or bringer of light. And light has always been a symbol of knowledge and awareness, probably even before we had a word for light. The unknown is in the dark. What's known is in the light. So that's awareness, knowledge, that sort of thing. So if you elaborate on that, the folklore and mythology and ideas that have built up around that concept include the idea of finding the light in the darkness, force of enlightenment, the quest for knowledge, especially knowledge that is hidden or forbidden, and sharing that with others. It's not just about finding the light, it's about sharing the light, bringing that light. So there is that drive to share that knowledge with others, who, especially those who are seeking it, not, shoving it down people's throats or anything like that, but just making it available. And you have this idea of the light bearer archetype, which a perfect example of that would be Prometheus, where he stole the fire from the gods of Mount Olympus and brought it to humanity, taught the people how to utilize the fire. And this was knowledge that Zeus didn't want the humans to have, because he wanted the humans to be dependent and weak and easier to control. And giving them the fire actually made them more self-sufficient and independent and harder to control, basically. So it upset that status quo that Zeus preferred. And because of that, because it undermined the system of control and power that Zeus was wielding, he lashed out at Prometheus and punished him. And so there is that element of risk involved being a light bearer or a Lucifer is that when you undermine systems of control through sharing knowledge, then those who benefit from the system of power control will try and lash out at you or retribution. And even those who are victims of those systems of power will often lash out as well, because they are so indoctrinated by it that they feel their identity has been threatened. So you don't always have, in all of the different examples that you can find of the light bearer archetype, you don't always have that lashing out or that punishment, but in a lot of examples you see that, such as serpent in Eden in the Genesis story. Shared forbidden knowledge with humans that empowered them, it made them more aware. It was knowledge that the god of that story didn't want them to have. And then the serpent was punished for it. Although you do have other light bearers, such as the Babylonian Ea, which is, you go back even further to Sumerian, that would be Enki. And Enki, he went behind the backs of the other gods, give humans knowledge that they weren't supposed to have, which empowered them to survive, basically, because the other gods wanted to wipe them out. And he didn't really have that backlash because he was so powerful. He was a god, basically. They didn't really have the ability to lash out. But not just in mythology. You don't just see this light bearer archetype playing out in myths, but in real life. So, for example, you have the example of Galileo Galilei, who shared knowledge that he had derived through logic and scientific discovery, which disagreed with the established doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church, which was extremely powerful at the time. And because that knowledge undermined the authority of the church, they basically imprisoned him and forced him to recant. But the thing is, the knowledge was already out there. You can't put that genie back in the lamp. Oh, the toothpaste doesn't go back in the tube. It was already out there, and it already started sowing the seeds of doubt in the masses. It undermined the church's authority and their position in people's minds because people were questioning it. And so that's an example of an individual from history who embodied that light bearer archetype in their own unique way. And as a Luciferian, I think that this is the key element of Luciferianism, is to embody the light bearer archetype in your own unique way, depending on the circumstances that you find yourself in life and society and that sort of thing. To become a Lucifer in your own right, to earn that title of light bearer. And that's why I named the new order, the esoteric order that I founded, the New Order of Light Bearers, because the members themselves are the light bearers. It's not important in my mind, or it's not important in my mind whether or not you are working with, worshiping, or whatever word you want to use, an external entity named Lucifer. And I do believe that entity exists, that there is a specific entity named Lucifer that does exist. I do believe that. But I don't think that's the key point about Luciferianism. I think the key point is whether you are working toward embodying that light bearer archetype in your own, expressing that light bearer archetype through your life, through the way that you live your life in the world, sharing knowledge that you found, undermining systems of control, empowering people through knowledge, and that sort of thing.
What are your thoughts on Lucifer specifically? Do you believe he's like a benevolent, angelic deity like some of the Luciferians, or like a force in the universe? How do you think he interacts with our universe?
Yeah, well, I think that I look at the word Lucifer in two different ways. One of them as a title of any entity that embodies the light bearer archetype in their own way. But I do also see Lucifer as the proper name of an entity. And that entity, has developed a lot of folklore around itself. Whether that be a type of an egregore that is built up, or whether it pre-existed, or whether it is the purest expression of that archetype. But we see it's typically associated with the serpent in Eden, as well as the idea of an angelic being who rebelled against God of the Bible. And I consider myself a Gnostic, as I had said before, a Gnostic Luciferian. And so the way that I view that is I view that God as what Gnostics refer to as the demiurge, which is this false god, essentially, or a god or an entity that should not be worshipped, but seeks to keep people ignorant and obedient, disempowered, and ultimately feeds off of people, essentially like a vampire, almost you could think of. This demiurgic figure or entity, it thinks it's the highest entity, but really it's just another entity out there, part of this grand dream that we're all in, that all of us are dream characters within this grand dream, including the demiurge isn't just another dream character within this grand dream. It's not the dreamer, but it thinks it is. And so Lucifer would be an entity that rebelled against that realized the truth of things, gained lucidity within this grand dream, and realized it wasn't going to accept the authority of the demiurge, and was able to awaken other beings to that truth. Even if it was not the majority, but that quest continues to stay, increase the level of lucidity amongst all entities, really.
What are your thoughts on Satan? Do you think he's synonymous with Lucifer?
I don't use the word Satan as synonymous with Lucifer, although there is definitely some overlap there. The word Satan comes from the Hebrew, which means adversary, or sometimes it's translated as accuser, but definitely there's some overlap there with the idea of Lucifer as rebellion, or as a leader of the rebellion against the demiurge, because that adversary would be against that system of control to keep people ignorant. You can see that overlap there. Although I do feel like there's a different egregore or a different entity that is, there's some overlap and there's some relation there, but I see them as separate things.
What are your thoughts on demons? Do you think they exist?
Definitely. And I think that a lot of it depends on the way that you use words. Demon could refer to inner demons, parts of yourself that are not integrated into the whole concept of the self, that are acting out because they seek integration with the self, that parts of yourself that you've denied, parts of yourself that have kind of splintered off because of traumas and that sort of thing. And that's like on the microcosmic level. Now on the outer macrocosmic level, I see the word demon would be more appropriate for those beings that have rebelled against the authority of the demiurge. So in traditional theology, you could say an angel and a demon are the same species of entity, you could say, for lack of a better word. But a demon is just one who has chosen not to obey God, or which I refer to as the demiurge. One that typically, if you look at the folklore and the stories and the forbidden texts, such as the Book of Enoch and that sort of thing, demons would be angels that decided to side with humans, on the side of humans, to free humans by giving them knowledge that was forbidden to them. Angels that decided not to be on team demiurge anymore, but to be on team human, to help us along by giving us knowledge, and also to have relations with us on a more intimate level as well. Like you see some of these stories about intimate relation, humans, rebellious angels. So to me, that word demon refers to angels that have taken up our side of the battle, I guess you could say, against the demiurge, against oppression, against sharing knowledge that the demiurge didn't want us. So depending on whether you're looking inward or outward, I see the word demon meaning two different things. So one would be the parts of yourself that, and there's connection there too, because the inner demons, they hold type of forbidden, hidden knowledge about the self that is being suppressed by the conscious mind, that is within the shadow, the internal shadow, you could say. Once we can learn to accept those parts of ourselves that have been rejected or isolated through traumas and that sort of thing, once we can accept those parts of ourselves and undergo a healing process, we can integrate those parts of ourselves back into the self in a healthy, harmonious way, and we gain that knowledge that was lost through isolating that soul fragment, you could say. So there is some overlap there. There is some common themes with the external.
Moving into some questions more revolving around LRS, what would you say are the goals of LRS as an organization?
I would say the primary goals of the Luciferian Research Society, the LRS, would be one, to strengthen the bonds between the different branches of the left-hand path. to open up those avenues of communication and cooperation to strengthen the wider community of left-hand path occultists. The other goal would be to make knowledge available to those who are looking for it. So people who are curious about this type of thing, they want to learn about the various different branches within the left-hand path, within occultism. The Luciferian Research Society is a place that they can go to find out about those different branches, find individuals who are practicing and experienced in those different branches that they can learn more about, and they can find what resonates with them and then learn about where they can go take it further. So for example, if they wanted to take Gnostic Luciferian further and learn system of occultism based around that branch of the left-hand path, then they can join the Novus Ordo Luciferi, become part of a team of, or a group of dedicated individuals who are studying that in particular. Or they can learn about draconian Luciferianism and what that means, and where they can go to take it further, to take their path further and on a more dedicated path within that branch. Or even what they can learn about Theistic Satanism, or any number of different branches. So those are the two main goals: to build bridges between the different branches of the left-hand path, open up the lines of communication, and then secondly, to become a repository of knowledge that people can access or looking for it.
What would you say makes LRS different from other occult groups?
Most other occult groups are focused on a particular branch or tradition within occultism or the left-hand path, whereas the Luciferian Research Society is a place for all of the different branches and traditions to come together. The other big difference is that often there are hierarchies and titles, even schools thought that are taught. The Luciferian Research Society doesn't have any of those things. It's not an order. It's not a church. It doesn't have titles. It doesn't cost anything, and it doesn't have its own teeth. It's a crossroads. It's a meeting place. It's a place for where we can build bridges with each other, and that I don't think exists very, very often. It's been something that has been around for a long time too. It's been I founded that back in 2009, and we've done a lot during that time. We're hitting another level of momentum past, I would say, year in terms of our activity, reaching people, representing more and more different groups and traditions and that sort of thing. So it's a way to kind of build the different bonds between the community. Because the thing is, in Satanism, in Luciferianism, and that sort of community, there's so few of us to begin with, and we all have our own perspectives. This is a way that we can strengthen the community and support one another while still maintaining our own individual practice and perspective. And we somehow managed to create a very open and welcoming environment where people respect one another, And I think that that's something that pretty unique, special.
What are your plans for the future of the group?
Well, we have been doing a lot of online meetings, public open meetings that include people sharing their different perspectives and knowledge that they've gathered about different topics that would be of interest to the community in general. So that's really inspiring. We've been building a lot of momentum through that. The next stage is to start getting local branches going. People meeting up and doing that same sort of thing, but in person in their local areas around the world. And as I was saying earlier, we're just about to get some meetings going in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. We actually have had a couple sort of unofficial meetings to kind of test the waters, but we're going to start doing official, regular meetings of the Luciferian Research Society. The local branches are called Obelisk, and it's not just a representation of one particular group, but people who are involved in the Novus Ordo Luciferi, of course, members of the Order of Phosphorus, members of the Sect of the Horned God, individual solo practitioners, people who are involved in all kinds of different groups, and people who aren't involved in any group at all are welcome to participate in this project. Get local branches going where public meetings are being held, where people are coming together and sharing their knowledge, their stories, their journey, and doing so regularly in person. And so that's the next major phase of the Luciferian Research Society.
Moving into more questions based around the New Order of Light Bearers, what would you say are some challenges you've faced as a group?
Some challenges that we face as a group, I think part of it is because everybody has such a diverse range of perspectives. I think that can sometimes be a challenge I think that a lot of people can relate to this, that it makes it challenging sometimes to form community when everybody has such a diverse perspective. The way that we're dealing with that is everybody has the utmost level of freedom to explore their path the way that they see fit as individuals. And if anything in the teachings of the order or practices disagrees with the way that they feel, they're welcome to adapt it. They're welcome to ignore it. We're not expecting people to just take everything that is said in the teachings or the practices as gospel, as dogma. So I think that goes a long way, allowing people their own autonomy to explore the material as they see fit, and not have a lot of strict rules about that sort of thing. So that's how we've been dealing with that. But I think that's a challenge in most of Tampath. And ours is no different. But I think we've managed it pretty well. Sorry.
You cut out then. What are your thoughts on other Luciferian groups?
Other Luciferian groups, the cool thing about Luciferianism is that most of the major Luciferian groups that are active out there are all friends with each other, pretty much. So I don't see a major conflict. I think that pretty much the different major Luciferian groups out there all kind of teach a different branch of Luciferianism, a different perspective within Luciferianism. And I think that that's great. I think that diversity within the community is something that makes sense, because Luciferianism is non-dogmatic. There's no dogma. Nobody should be telling anyone else how to be a Luciferian. They can share their own perspective on what they think it means, but nobody's imposing that on anyone else. And so basically, there's no Pope of Luciferianism. There are, thought leaders that have a lot of experience and knowledge in a particular perspective, and they're sharing their thoughts and knowledge and experience and that sort of thing, which is great. That's resource. And within the Novus Ordo Luciferi, for example, we don't restrict people to only be part of the NOL. So if you are in the Novus Ordo Luciferi or the New Order of Light Bearers, you are free to join and participate in any other esoteric order or group that you are interested in. And I think that can only benefit a person to have multiple perspectives that they're exploring and figuring out what works for them and adapting it to their own personal use in their own unique practice that they will ultimately develop for themselves. So I don't see a big conflict. I see different schools teaching complementary teachings and knowledge that can cooperate with each other.
What plans do you have for the future of the group?
Of the Novus Ordo Luciferi?
Yeah.
So for the future of the group, I do also see local branches of that. The thing is, it's a lot smaller than the Luciferian Research Society because it is just that one school of thought that it's dedicated to. It's a vehicle for teaching Gnostic Luciferian alchemy specifically. So, it's by default, it's always going to be smaller than the Luciferian Research Society. But I do think that it would be great if we can get some local branches of the Novus Ordo Luciferi going as well, where people who are in an area where there are a handful of members can get together and do group rituals and that sort of thing in person, and not just communicating with one another online and having online meetings, that sort of thing. And I have met in person other members, and there's a desire for that. I do want to make sure that all of the practices of the NOL can be done as a solo practitioner without a group, because there are a lot of people that are in very isolated areas, and sometimes even areas that are hostile to type of practice and belief, where they can't openly share that they're involved in this sort of thing because of it could be dangerous for them or detrimental to their daily lives. So it's important that they still be able to have the opportunity to participate in the system for themselves. But I also have group rituals that would be great to be able to do with a group. I do have a method of doing group rituals as a solo practitioner using a type of tarot magic that I've developed. But it's also nice to be able to do it with other people as well. So that's one of the things that I'd like to get going more, and having the local branches of the LRS help with that as well. It can help with other groups establishing their own local branches of their own specific schools of thought as well. I think that can facilitate a bunch of different groups forming the local branches in areas, because it allows people to find it. It's a public face of the community where they can come together and they can find out about other practitioners, and it makes it easier for different groups to form local branches of their own kind of private school of thought. So those two things kind of go hand in hand. I also want to establish the degree system in a more active way, whereas right now structure exists, but it hasn't been fully activated yet. That's something that I've been working on lately, because that's something that I think a lot of the members are very interested in, because it does provide that guidance about to navigate the system, what practices are logically a logical progression through the practices and teaching. So I think that would be a very useful thing to activate the grade system. Although, as I said before, it's still optional. Don't lock people out of because they haven't reached a certain grade. They're free to explore the material in their own way if they don't want to go through that grade system. But it is there for people who benefit from it. So those are the two main things that I'm working on for the Novus Ordo Luciferi, is getting that degree system that has been mapped out, getting it fully activated, and then also getting local branches established. The Novus Ordo Luciferi is a lot younger than the LRS. The Novus Ordo Luciferi has only been around for about 2.5 years now. So we're still at ground zero, really. The people who are involved now are all on the ground floor, essentially, of this. But I've got a very grand vision for it. I think it could be something really special.
Moving into some questions based around your YouTube channel. What would you say the purpose of a YouTube channel is?
I started my YouTube channel about 15 and a half years ago, something like that. And I started it, and it was a very casual thing where I would just post here and there when I felt inspired to. In recent years, I've gotten a lot more consistent and dedicated to using it as a platform for sharing knowledge, making knowledge available to those who are seeking it. And this is part of my way of serving the community, of acting as a light bearer in my own unique way. I do have a lot of knowledge and experience of having just for so long, and have a lot of different experiences to draw from, and all the different studies and experiments, and how my practice has evolved over time. And this is a way for me to have a public repository of knowledge, that somebody is looking for knowledge in some of those areas that I've developed an expertise in, then they can find that knowledge freely without having any kind of paywall or that sort of thing. So it's a huge, sure how many videos I have now, but it's in the hundreds for sure. Something like I might be approaching 500 videos now. And some of them are shorts and a lot of them are long form. And it's just a way for me to share knowledge with the community, with publicly, no cost, anybody to act. So that, also it's a way for me to share the different projects that I'm involved in, and promote what I'm doing. If there's a conference, which I refer to, name that those conferences go by these days is Flambeau Noir, which means black torch. And if I have a Flambeau Noir conference scheduled, I can use my YouTube channel to promote that upcoming event. If people are giving lectures openly through the Luciferian Research Society, I've been able to give them a platform to share that knowledge with a wider audience through my YouTube channel as well. Because a lot of the people that are giving lectures may not have their own platform. They may not have a YouTube channel, social media, or they may not have written any books, but they have their own knowledge that they wanted to share. And so I'm able to take some of those lectures and post them publicly, and they can get their voice out there through that platform that I've built up over 15 years. So that's the main reason that I have it, is become a repository of public knowledge. My quest to be a light bearer, embody that light bearer archetype in my own unique way, and also to give other people platform, share their knowledge and their voice that may not have a platform.
If you could recommend one video from your channel to the audience, which would it be?
That's a good question. Probably there's a video that I have uploaded there called, what is it called? Cultism in the New Luciferian Era. I think it's called something like that. The occult practice in the New Luciferian Era. And what that video is, it's the recording of a lecture I gave at the University of Toronto on the subject of how traditional occult practices, a lot of them aren't really occult anymore. Occult meaning secret or hidden. That a lot of the practices that part of the traditional cult, toolkit, you could say, a lot of them have had scientific study which has validated their usefulness and their validity, really, and how and even explains how some of them work in different ways. So this is kind of like a gateway. So for people who are curious about the occult, but maybe are weary about superstitious thinking, or maybe they consider themselves an atheist, or they're not sure what they believe, this is a way for them to start exploring occult practices without feeling silly or weird about it. It gets them a way to engage with the material and can start exploring it without having to have any type of belief in anything. And I think that that can be important for certain people, for a certain demographic. And once they start practicing it, they'll be able to decide for themselves whether there's another element to it beyond the surface level that is scientifically provable or explainable. So, for example, lucid dreaming. That's something that has been scientifically proven as a real thing. There's a lot of people that doubted that it even existed, that they're like, what? Be awake in a dream, if you're sleeping. It was something that a lot of people couldn't even wrap their heads around if they hadn't experienced it before. But once it had been scientifically proven and studied, then people were like, oh, well, maybe this is an interesting thing for me to explore. And once they start exploring it, then they have different experiences, and then they can decide for themselves whether there's something even further beyond it than scientifically proven or scientifically provable part of it or aspect of it. Maybe there's something more spiritual or esoteric behind it as well. That lecture that I gave at the U of T gets into not just lucid dreaming, but a handful of other esoteric practices that could explore and decide for themselves if there's something more beyond the scientifically verifiable part of it. So I think that that would be one of the more important videos that I have on the channel, because it allows people to give themselves permission to explore these things if they don't already have a set of beliefs. And then they can explore that on their own beyond that, whether they think that they don't even have to go further than that. They can start utilizing occult practices without belief. And then as they explore them, maybe or maybe not, they'll go further. But it at least gets them, it gives them mental permission to explore these things. A lot of people may not have given themselves that permission. So I think that's probably one of my more important videos that's on my channel right now. A good starting point for a lot of people.
What plans do you have for the future of the channel?
Just keeping on, really. I have been posting a lot of the public lectures that occur in the online meetings of the Luciferian Research Society. I'd like to also share recordings of in-person meetings. And I've done that before as well, but I'd like to ramp that up as different branches open up. I'd like to showcase that there are people out there that are meeting in person and talking about these interesting topics. Inspire people to get their own local groups going where they can create a space for that to occur, for people to come together and share their different perspectives, their different knowledge base, their expertise, their journey and thing.
Moving into some shorter questions that didn't really fit into the other categories, what do you think makes somebody a Luciferian?
Like I said before, I don't think anybody can tell another person whether they are a Luciferian or not. You have people, that if anybody says you're not a true Luciferian because this or because that, well, they're kind of violating that non-dogmatic aspect of Luciferian. So ultimately, I say what makes a person Luciferian is that they have decided they are a Luciferian, that they have adopted that as accurate description of their of beliefs about what that means. So really, it's self-determined whether a person is a Luciferian or not. They decide for themselves. And you don't have to be initiated into a particular group or have some external authority figure tell you, okay, now you are a Luciferian. You don't need permission from anyone else to be a Luciferian. You just decide, I'm a Luciferian. And that's what makes you a Luciferian. Now, to take it to another level, my own personal opinion on what the most important aspects of Luciferianism are, and other people might have very different opinions on this, but my personal opinion is that you are seeking after knowledge, especially knowledge that has been hidden or considered forbidden knowledge by different authorities, and to share that knowledge where you're able to. In other words, embody the light bearer typing your own, become a Lucifer in your own right, or to earn that title for yourself. I think that that's, personally, I think that that is the core of what it means to be a Luciferian to me. And whether somebody is theistic Luciferian, or if they're atheistic, or they're a philosophical or lifestyle Luciferian, I think is less important. I think that all different perspectives can still be Luciferian. To me, in my opinion, the most important part is whether you're seeking after knowledge, sharing, or making knowledge available in some way or another. But yeah, I think that ultimately it comes down to deciding whether you're a Luciferian or, my opinion, what that means is not as important, whether it's something to you.
What are your thoughts on people labeling Luciferianism as reverse Christianity or devil worship?
Well, I think that there might be branches of Luciferianism that kind of are, I suppose. And I think that that can be an important stage for some people to go through, where if they have had very poor experiences with Christianity, for example, maybe they were raised Christian and maybe they felt hard done by because of that. Maybe they broke out of their indoctrination, or they're still trying to break out of their indoctrination that they received through Christianity. I think that practicing form of reverse Christianity can be a method that they can utilize to help them break free from that indoctrination. It can be very cathartic for a person to practice essentially reverse Christianity. But I don't think that ultimately one needs to stay in that state. Sort of like I hopefully people will expand beyond that, and potentially they may not need that anymore. Their understanding of Luciferianism will evolve, expand. And I don't think that everybody needs that thing that is full for some people, but not for everyone. So, for people to say that all Luciferianism is reverse Christianity, I think is completely false. I do think that that can be an element of some practice.
What do you hope to have accomplished by next year?
By next year, I hope to have my tarot deck available for purchase. There's a tarot deck that I'm developing, and actually it's kind of evolved beyond just a tarot. Turned, as I've been developing it, thing that I've been practicing for a very long time as well. I picked up tarot when I was 17, and I had actually been exposed to cartomancy, divination, well before that. And so it's something that's been part of my life for a very long time. And I think that it's a very, very useful tool. And I have kind of expanded upon it to some extent and developed other ways of working with it. And so I wanted to manifest my own vision for a tarot deck that I've had for a long time, to a physical deck that I could share with other people, and share my methods with people. And so as I've been developing it, it has turned into more of a, I like to refer to it as like a universal divination system, which includes standard tarot, my own expansions on the tarot, as well as Lenormand Oracle, Geomancy, and even I Ching. And it combines all that. You can do readings that have layers of meaning depending on which parts of that side to engage with. And I'm really excited about it. I think it's really cool. I've been hand drawing the images for the cards, and by this time next year, I hope to have completed it and have it out there. In addition to the things that I had already mentioned that I'm working on for the Luciferian Research Society and the Novus Ordo Luciferi, I think that my other major goal that I'd like to accomplish is to have that cartomancy deck available. It's something I'm really passionate about.
Our last question before we wrap up. Do you have any questions for me?
I'm curious about how you came to the path that you find yourself on. What label do you identify with the most, or resonate with the most, I should say? How did you come to find yourself on that path?
Well, personally, I'd call myself a theistic Satanist. I don't actually identify with any of the sects. I take a more individualistic approach to practice in general, which is actually the reason why I invited you onto the podcast. I think your views towards practice are actually very similar towards mine, although we do disagree on a few things. Mainly the view on atheistic Satanism. I believe that if you were going to be a Satanist, that you are embodying Satan, a literal entity, and you have to accept that at least exists in some extent. You know what I mean? Yeah, personally, the way I got into Satanism was I was Protestant, very young. I went to a Protestant church and all that. And after I'd gone out of that, I had stumbled across Theistic Satanism, various forms of it. At first, there was Atheistic Satanism through the Satanic Temple and the Church of Satan, although I didn't find their ideology very fulfilling. Something I hear from other Satanists as well. They seem very hollow. Their beliefs, their philosophy generally is more of like a structure for practicing rather than actually practicing it. In my view, at least, some people might have some different view on it, but I don't really see what many people would get out of practicing atheistic Satanism. Personally, that's how I felt at the time as well. But I stumbled across various forms of Satanism, like diabolism, Luciferianism, and whatnot. And yeah, I don't think I ever really looked back. It's a much less authoritative system, as you said. It helped me actually grow, like religiously and stuff like that. Which Christianity, generally, questioning things it's very looked down upon. They don't like you asking questions about things. You're supposed to just like accept and conform. And I've never liked that. I hate the idea of that. I hate the idea of not questioning things. Like the number one thing you'll hear me sell my channel is question absolutely everything, take everything with a grain of salt, even from me. You know what I mean? I'm no
Yes.
authority figure, and I've never claimed to be. You know, but yeah, like yeah, well, that's a long story short, really.
Yeah, well, I definitely can resonate with your what you said about atheistic Satanism, and I find within the groups that utilize the term Satanism specifically, rather than Luciferianism, the groups that are out there that are explicitly uh, atheistic, I don't find any interest there for me. I agree with your assessment, and it tends to be a bit more empty. That a lot of times people just use it as a symbol of for political purposes, really. To me, that's not even an occult. That's not part of the occult community at all. Just, I think that people who are interested in occultism, occult practices, if they were to join an atheistic Satanism group, I think that they're going to be pretty disappointed.
Yeah,
So I can
a lot of
definitely
these
see what
groups
you're
are
coming
like,
from with that.
yeah, like you said, it becomes like a symbol, like a aesthetic, a political movement kind of thing. Like a lot of things that, well, one of the main things I've noticed with atheistic Satanists is they don't actually know where their symbols come from. They're not aware of the history. They're not aware of, you know what I mean. Yet they'll use these symbols, and I think that's very deceptive. You know what I mean? To associate your new political movement with these ancient ideas, you know what I mean? These come from thousands of years ago. We can see the evolution of the adversary over thousands of years. To just link these very modern ideas to this and claim, oh yeah, like we are the founders, we are the. I think that's just it's disgraceful. I think it goes against the idea of Satanism. You know what I mean? You're saying you're truth seekers and all that, yet you don't seek the truth. I feel like it's a lot of the time these people are just associating with that for some sort of like perceived like societal gain or something. I don't know why they do that, because there's no societal gain to being a Satanist or a Luciferian. If anything, you make it like harder. I'm sure you can agree with that. But
Right.
yeah, yeah, I don't think that
Sorry, I'll let you finish what you're saying there.
Yeah, I don't see what they seek to gain out of it. But that was my wrap up to the old rant.
Yeah, I feel like to really engage with it properly, you have to at least be open to the idea or the possibility,
Yeah,
Whereas
definitely.
a lot of these atheistic Satanism groups that exist out there will mock people who have esoteric practice, and they'll even be like, "What the hell are you doing?" And you're like, "Well, I'm actually practicing satanic occultism," and they will even laugh at you sometimes and say, "That's all just superstitious nonsense or whatever." And I feel like they're calling themselves Satanists, but they're not open-minded to the possibility of knowledge and exploring something that they don't understand. I think you have to at least be open to the possibility of it. I don't think that you necessarily have to be a believer, but I do think that you have to be at least open to the idea.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you there. I feel like if you're just gonna like trap yourself in this like echo chamber of, oh yeah, like, oh, this is how it is, like this is how, like, it'll never change and all that stuff, like you lock yourself into these very limited ideas, you know what I mean? And again, that's another thing I've noticed with them. They have very little variation in ideas, which just makes them come off very culty, you know what I mean? I don't like that about many groups, you know what I mean? I feel like there should be a lot of variation, like even with like the more orthodox things like Christianity and stuff like that. You'll still see a lot of variation in their groups. With a lot of atheistic groups, you don't see that, and I think that's a big red flag for them. You know what I mean? Unless you're
Yeah.
talking like Church of Satan and like TST, because they are quite different.
Yeah, those two are pretty different. But both of them would be atheistic nature.
Yeah, definitely.
And they both don't tend to like each other very much.
No, that's a funny thing about them as well. I don't see why they argue so much, because again, like the little amount of variation in them, you'd think they'd be a lot more united than the theistic side. Although they argue just as much as we do, which is, you know, quite unfortunate. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's
that's kind of part of what I'm trying to do, is trying to create spaces for people with different perspectives to share knowledge and that sort of thing without worrying about titles, or within an environment that's mutually respectful of everybody. So that's the Luciferian Research Society is intended to be, because I do see a lot of infighting, and I feel like I said before, we're such a small group of people to begin with that we should embrace the differences in our perspectives, because it means we get to learn about different things, and people feel free to share that knowledge that they've gained with each other. And we have more in common than we have different, I think, that we can build community around those commonalities.
Well, that wraps up the questions I've got for you. It's been a good conversation. I think this will be a very good episode on the YouTube. I think people, well, especially my audience, are going to really appreciate your view on Luciferianism, especially your view towards practice and the other groups and stuff, because again, I feel like we are quite similar in that aspect. But it's been great having you on the channel, Hail Satan, and I hope to speak to you soon.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. I had a blast chatting with you, and yeah, hail Lucifer, hail thyself. Stay lucid.
Stay lucid.